Welcome to Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show, brought to you by True North.
Hello and welcome to you all, Canada's most irreverent talk show here. This is the Andrew Lawton Show on True North on this Monday, July 22nd, 2024. Hope you're having a fantastic summer so far. I'm having an all right summer. It got off to a busy start. I had the release of my new book at the end of May. I was on a book tour for much of June, and then I think I just exhausted myself. I had way too much activity early on, and I was thinking, okay, maybe we can just coast through the summer and there won't be too much in the news division. And then I see, okay, of course, Trump subject to an attempted assassination. Then you fast forward a couple of days, Joe Biden resigned over the weekend, not as president, but from the presidential race. So he is no longer going to be seeking re-election. He's thrown his support behind Kamala Harris just a couple of weeks before the Democrats meet for their big convention in Chicago. So it's, of course, made me Canadianize it just a little bit. We try not to focus too much on just the American news and politics here because there are no shortage of shows that obviously dwell on that because they're in the United States. But sometimes there's a Canadian tie-in. There's a Canadian connection to it. And I find that you can make a lot of similarities between Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden. Now, obviously, one has, the beautiful wavy hair. The other has a little bit less hair than he used to. But both of them are known to make just completely incomprehensible sentences. I mean, when Justin Trudeau talked about what a drink water, drink bottle, water box is, that was basically just as sensible, if not less than, compared to anything Joe Biden said in that debate with CNN and Donald Trump a couple of weeks back. And they're both in the midst of having faced massive and mounting calls for their resignation. Now, Joe Biden was just as indignant about this as Justin Trudeau was for much of the last several weeks, saying, I'm not going anywhere. And then one day, yesterday, he comes out with the statement and says he is gone. He announces his resignation. He says it's been the greatest honor of his life to serve as president. And while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. Oh, I'm already falling a little bit asleep reading Joe Biden's words. Now, interestingly enough, I don't have too much regard for Joe Biden as a president. I think that he has a long career of public service, and when people cap that off in an unceremonious way, it's unfortunate to them. Had he just not run for re-election in the first place, he would have gone out with a lot more dignity than he ended up going out with by choosing it this way. Nonetheless, he's being honored and lauded by people on social media for his contribution to statesmanship, for being a man who decided to, at this one critical point, do the honorable thing and get the heck out of Dodge. Now, whatever you think of Kamala Harris, whatever you think of Donald Trump, that's kind of my read on the Joe Biden situation, is that whatever his foibles have been and whatever the capacity issues have been, of which there are a great many concerns that we should be discussing, he did an honorable thing here by announcing he was going to stand down. It would have been great if he reached it earlier as a conclusion, but better late than never, as they say. But it's a great contrast to Justin Trudeau, a guy who does not want to put the good of his country or his party forward. He doesn't want to put it ahead of his own ambition, a guy who seems all too happy to just go down with the ship. I don't have the Dido clip that we played a couple of weeks ago, but you may recall we had Dido White Flag, and there's that great line in the chorus, I will go down with this ship. That is basically Justin Trudeau's anthem right now, and I think the attitude that he has about the Liberal Party and its health and vitality and fortune moving forward. So why am I bringing this up now? Well, it was just a few weeks ago that Justin Trudeau and the Liberals lost that critical by-election in Toronto, St. Paul's. Don Stewart will be going to Toronto or going to Ottawa as a member of Parliament. Absolutely embarrassing to the Liberals who had expected to just coast to victory like they always do in Toronto, St. Paul's. But instead, they have lost a seat that they had held for 30 years, for 3 decades. Justin Trudeau has been facing calls from his members of parliament to have an in-person caucus meeting, MPs that want to get together in person under one roof to say, how the heck do we fix this? How do we turn this around? How do we prevent ourselves from all being St. Paul'd by the time of the next election? And Justin Trudeau said, well, we can't get everyone in the same room. It's going to be difficult logistically to do it. He's had some one-on-one calls, but Justin Trudeau did find time to leave on a jet plane. Doesn't know when he'll be back again. We had the eagle-eyed flight trackers on the weekend tracking CanForce One, the government of Canada's plane that they use when the Prime Minister is traveling. And what do you know? Ottawa departed at 13:56. That's 1:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Landed in Tofino, British Columbia at 15:47 Pacific Daylight Time. So that is a flight from YOW to YAZ, YOW to YAZ. Justin Trudeau ended up going to Tofino on vacation. Now, I wouldn't begrudge the man a summer vacation with his family in July. I do not actually take an issue with it. I know Justin Trudeau often faces criticism for deciding to go on vacation. He loves vacations. I actually don't criticize him for it. I think we would be better off as a country if he were to take more vacations. If he were to just treat most of his entire time in office as vacation, I think we would be better. Now, interestingly, I took a look at Trudeau's itineraries because even though I'm banned from their events, I actually still get the media releases that have the itineraries because I think they're public. Anyone can get them. But here's what he has for Monday, July 22nd. British Columbia, Canada. No city, no town, no village, just British Columbia. And no public events scheduled. Doesn't say personal, it says no public events scheduled. Now, very similar to the itinerary for July 22nd, no public events scheduled. The 19th, the 20th, it was the same. He started in Ottawa, ended up going to Tofino. So they're not even doing what they used to do on these when he was going on vacation and saying it was personal. Trudeau is on vacation right now. He's on vacation with his family. He's allowed to go there. He's spending it in Tofino, one of his favorite destinations. The media reports about this have acknowledged that he's on vacation, but he's still pretending he's working. He's still pretending he's working. He's still saying no public meetings, as though he's having all of these private meetings that we're all supposed to know about instead of just sitting on the beach. So if I'm a Liberal caucus member and I've been demanding an in-person meeting with Justin Trudeau because I want to figure out what his plan is to save us from calamity as a party, I'd be pretty upset right now that he found time for a vacation in Tofino, but didn't find time for a caucus meeting. I mean, look, he could have just said, we'll have our caucus meeting in Tofino. He could have just rolled out of the beachfront pad, just kind of sauntered down to the beach, have the 100 and some odd beach chairs set up there, set up the Chiavari chairs. They're probably left over from the wedding that was held there on Friday. And they could have had their caucus meeting there. And then at the end, he goes and grabs his surfboard and, hangs 10 or whatever. And basically hanging 10 is the Liberal poll numbers right now because all they're going to be left with is 10, or hanging 10 is just how many MPs they're going to be left with at the last election. Or the next election. But the whole point of this is that Trudeau has found time to start picking all these fights with the Conservatives. He's found time to go surfing. He has not found time to deal with the MPs in his caucus who have some very serious concerns about the state of the party. And the Liberals have decided to go negative. They launched this big, huge campaign today that was criticizing Pierre Poilievre's record. And there's a website for this, and I can't remember the pierresrecord.ca. There it is. And if you look on the website, they just have all these things that they're supposedly exposing from Poilievre and the last 20 years that he's been in office. Now, hilariously, so the number one there is work to bring American-style anti-union laws to Canada. But the second one, which was in the lead for a while, is committed to free votes, allowing his MPs to bring forward anti-abortion legislation. And the little, do you see the put that up there again, Sean? Do you see underneath that, there's the number with the clown emoji? So you can go to this website and you can vote for which one you think is more embarrassing. And right now, that anti-union one is in the leaderboard at 1680, or right now it's 1,686 clown votes. But by the way, 155 clown votes is what the Liberal caucus is whenever they vote on something. But the number two one is committing to free votes. And I was finding it hilarious that the Liberals are so hell-bent on exposing that, when if you were to canvass Canadians, I think most of them would hope that MPs did have free votes. So it's not really a scandal that Pierre Poilievre has said Conservative MPs will have free votes on matters of conscience. But here is the sizzle reel that the Liberals put together exposing Pierre Poilievre and his record.
Posing for photos of a man wearing a straight pride t-shirt.
Radical gender ideology.
The CEO of Elections Canada has indicated his opposition to it. Let me just say that I'm at peace with that.
You believe that the Bitcoin is the best tool for you to transact?
Marriage ought to be preserved as a union between one man and one woman.
We will fight tooth and nail to put a permanent end to vaccine mandates.
I was out on an overpass as the truckers went by, and what I saw were cheerful, patriotic, optimistic Canadians.
We're conservatives, so we don't believe in that.
So this is the big gotcha. He said he's against vaccine mandates. He says he doesn't care if the chief electoral officer of Canada is against party policy for what was at the time the Conservative government. He stood up against gay marriage when that was the majority position in the country. And by the way, even many Liberal members of Parliament in 2005 voted against legalizing gay marriage at the time. And then what were some of the other scandals? I'll go down the list here. He apparently went to an overpass and cheered on the convoy as it went to Ottawa. Oh my goodness, shocking. The fact that he is against mandates, they find to be some big scandal, which just reminds Canadians that the Liberals were very much pro-mandate. So it's weird that this is where they're going so early, because remember, we're going to be talking about guns later on the show. The Liberals have always done abortion and guns. Those are the two things: abortion, assault rifle, abortion, assault rifle, abortion, assault rifle. Those haven't been sticking with Poilievre. They have not found a way to make it stick. And Jean-Yves Duclos, the cabinet minister, he put out this tweet, which I have to share with you because it's funny. I've never actually smoked pot, but I imagine this is the type of thing I would say, or someone would say, if they were stoned out of their mind. He says, fun fact, a nickel is only 5 cents, and 5 is only one less than 6, which is the amount of affordable housing units that Pierre Poilievre built when he was Minister of Housing. So you have to like do it in like a stoner voice. Put that up there because I've forgotten what's on it again. Be like, okay, so like nickel is only 5 cents, but 5 is one less than 6, and 6, that's the number of affordable housing. Oh, far out, man. That's my my slang, by the way. Far out, man, is what I don't know if people still say far out, man, but like I said, I've been accused of many things in my life. Never once has being cool or hip been one of them. But that's basically it. Breaking news: Liberal. To be honest, the Liberal minister knowing that a nickel is worth 5 cents actually is breaking news. But some weird attempts at math there from the Liberal government. So Poilievre, when he was exposed in that reel and on that Liberal website, what was interesting is that most of those things were things that he's quite proud about. Like, I have never seen a Conservative leader in Canada so self-assured as Pierre Poilievre is about what he is and what he stands for. This was an interview that Poilievre did, and he was asked about a bill C-381. Now, just to give it a bit of context here, this is a private member's bill. It's a private member's bill from a Conservative member of Parliament that aims to beef up the law on extortion, which is a big thing in organized crime right now. Maybe not top of mind for most Canadians, but it's a real issue, and there are real communities, notably, I think, Surrey, BC, and Quebec, where this is happening. So, Conservative member of Parliament puts this bill forward, getting really a rough go from the Liberals in getting through, even though it's nothing particularly controversial. Poilievre is asked about that. Now, he is often known for wanting to use the simplest, clearest language possible. Doesn't get more exemplary of that than in this clip.
That is only your party which is saying that they voted against the bill and they don't want to support this bill C-381. What is the reason why they are not supporting it?
Because Justin Trudeau is a wacko.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
That's the answer. We have a wacko for a prime minister.
I just love it. The guy assumes there's so much more to come. And Pierre Poilievre just goes there because Justin Trudeau is a wacko. That's it. That's the answer. I love it. I love it. He has leaned into the wacko thing. So the context of this, he mentioned it. I think it was just off the cuff. He mentioned it in the House of Commons and then was told it was unparliamentary. And I looked it up. Let me look it up how many times he's used the word wacko. Like you look up Pierre Poilievre and wacko on Twitter, and he's using it like every freaking day, going back to April 30th when it happens. So it's now like the number one insult that he loves with Justin Trudeau is just calling him wacko, calling the government wacko. And I think there's something just hilarious about that because it's not even like a word that we use all that commonly. So I think it's going to be like gatekeepers, where wacko just enters the political lexicon. Do you remember when Obama was running and he had those like colored posters that said hope? Someone should do one with Trudeau that just says wacko if they haven't already. So maybe I'll do that. That'll be like my little Photoshop practice session after the show today. I'll do like an inspirational Obama-esque picture of Trudeau, and I'll just put the word wacko under it. But it'll take me far longer. So if anyone else is quicker with Photoshop and you want to get on this on social media, tag me in it, and I'll share it. There was something last week where I said I was going to do it, and then someone else beat me to the punch on X, as they now call it. So anyway, wanted to shift gears here a little bit, still keeping in the theme of what's going on in the federal government here. But the bureaucracy is about the only industry in Canada that is doing really, really well. Since Justin Trudeau took office, the bureaucracy has grown by 108,000 people. That's 108,000 more federal bureaucrats. That is a 42% increase in the size of the federal civil service. Well, there has only been a population increase in the same time of 14%. 14%. Now, that means that we have a disproportionate rise in the public sector. Now, this is not, by the way, with industry being nationalized in this time period. This is literally just the federal government ballooning while people in the private sector, aka the real world, are having to cut back and businesses are shutting down. Remember, this is covering the COVID era as well. Wanted to bring in Kris Sims, our regular Monday maven. She is the Alberta director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and joins us now. Kris, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
You have not seen in any businesses around you, I suspect, except for maybe a company that started up in 2015, 2016, a rise of 42% in its staffing with no discernible reason why. The federal government has not scaled up its services. The federal government has not added a new service. The federal government has, if anything, just tried to maintain. But this increase, massively so.
Yes, big time. For folks who are already mad about this, sorry to add to it, but just picture yourself using the federal government service, whatever it happens to be. A passport office, for example. Think back to 2014 and then think to now. Is your service 42% better? Are you 42% faster and more efficient and friendly and on the ball and more accurate?
Did your passport come 42% more quickly?
Exactly. And so this is where things really get frustrating. And the folks at the CTF team there in Ottawa are the ones who dug up these numbers. So like you said, that is an addition of more than 108,000 full-time positions. To give you an idea, that's the entire population of Red Deer has been added to the government employee list. It is just an astonishing number of people. And you're right, a 42% increase. People could say, okay, well, they've got more demand, more people are coming into Canada, our population is increasing. Dude, that's only a 14% increase in population. So the Trudeau government should be answering these questions as to why are you bloating the ranks of government employee rosters? And keep in mind, it isn't just the numbers here. The numbers are a big factor. But it's also the fact that a lot of these federal government employees, especially in the Ottawa-Gatineau area, in the capital, as Franco likes to call it from Hunger Games, they're complaining about having to go into work, like to put on pants and go into the office and work instead of working from home. Now, lots of people do work from home, and that's totally fine, right? But the thing is that this all started during the lockdowns. This all started during, the measures that were taken by the federal government. And they're still hanging on to not having to go into the office and just kind of working from their phones. And so folks really need to pick up the phone and call their members of parliament on this.
Well, and yeah, and so there's the raw numbers of this, which are concerning enough, and there's also, and I don't know how granular the details are right now, the question of what these jobs are and what people are getting paid. We know, generally speaking, that pay in the public sector is not proportionate or commensurate to what the private sector pay is. There have been various studies done on this, and it's anywhere from 10 to like 30% more for the same job in the private sector on average. And then there's also the pension aspect of this as well. And that, a lot of the bureaucrats have access to pensions that their colleagues in the private sector don't have. So a massive increase like this is incredibly, incredibly harmful to the government's books.
Oh, big time. They're there pretty much permanently. The idea of actually getting fired from your job, even for wrongdoing as a federal government employee, is almost incomprehensible. So I spent a lot of time working in Ottawa, living in Ottawa. A lot of it was actually at News Talk Radio. I think I booked you there as a guest many times, their CFRA radio station. And so I got to know some of these federal government employees quite well, and those who cater to them, literally, some of the caterers who bring in their lunches. And it became a term called the golden handcuff. So it goes something like this. Oh, I've got this office job. I have this cubicle job. It's super boring. I water houseplants for most of the day and play Candy Crush on my phone, but I don't want to leave because, like you just pointed out, I have job security, big pension, all that great stuff, and I'm paid more than the average person. Now, I got to be clear. There are some people who work within the federal government employee ranks. I have met them who do work hard. They do a very good job. They're efficient. They do keep the things running on time as best as they possibly can. But there's so much extra, I call them office furniture. There's so much bloat. And that was even 10 years ago. I can't imagine what it's like inside the ranks of the public service, as they call it right now.
Yeah, it's always great. I end up in Ottawa a lot just for interviews and events and whatnot. And literally, without fail, every time I walk down Spark Street or Albert Street or whatever, some federal bureaucrat will like come up to me and they'll like say in a really low voice, "Hey, Andrew, I like your show. I like your show." And I'm like, "Why are you whispering?" They're like, "Well, So they are there, and I know there are many of you, and I am not trying to take aim at you as individuals. It's about the institution as a whole. I mean, I wrote many years ago about how I worked at the LCBO, and I said, this is an absolute racket, but you know what? In university, I was happy to profit from that racket because it was an opportunity there. We need to have a government, I would say, doing far fewer things than most times, the government wants the government to be doing. But interestingly enough, I would just, to point out the numbers here, 42% increase in the size of the bureaucracy, 14% increase in population. Now, that means that the tax base has not increased with the size of government. Now, GDP has increased, wealth and wages and whatever has increased, but that means that the onus of paying for that workforce falls on a smaller and smaller share of the population proportionally, which means higher taxes. Am I missing something?
No, you nailed it. And to further illustrate what exactly you just said, more bodies, right? More people, okay, usually means more revenue for government because they're paying income taxes in their salaries. They're starting businesses and paying business taxes. Alberta is a perfect example, okay? We've been having the biggest population boom here since the oil patch boom of the late 70s, early 80s, before the first Trudeau wrecked everything. So that was a huge population in migration, okay, is what they call it, a big population boom. Our government revenues have gone up. So it's kind of fascinating. This is why we try to argue lower taxes, okay? Lower your taxes, your income taxes, lower your business taxes, because it increases your population. More human beings move to your geographical area and start paying taxes, and almost always that winds up with more money actually in government coffers because you're attracting that sort of industrious person. And you're exactly right, Andrew. We're not having that here. We've seen a more than 40% increase in the ranks of government employees, but a 14% increase in our population. So the burden is much higher for us as the payers.
Now, on the other side of this, I will say everything is not completely sunshine and roses for federal bureaucrats. The government has historically had issues paying them. Now, there's a part of, those listening that may say, good, we'll save a few bucks. But at the end of the day, if people are working for the government, they should be able to get paid. And this has been, how many years have we been talking about the Phoenix pay sit? Like, this has been the story. The Phoenix is supposed to rise from the ashes, but I feel this one has just been smoldering for the last decade. We've learned that the federal payroll system launched in 2016 to save $70 million has actually cost $3.7 billion almost. This is insane.
Yeah, it's totally nuts. So I'm going to tell you a little story. So I was at Sun News Network from startup until shut down. And then after that, I was with the Veterans Affairs Minister for a brief period of time. So I've seen, both sides of that rope in communications and journalism back and forth several times in my career. After I was with the Veterans Affairs Minister after 2015, I was back at 580 CFRA, helping to host and produce a show. The big story that started percolating around 4 months after the election changeover there, Andrew, was the Phoenix pay system. Now, for folks who don't know what this is, very quickly, the Phoenix pay system is a software program that manages the payroll for the mass of bureaucracy. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're out there trying to help save whales with scientists and the Coast Guard, okay, and you're paid by the federal government, or if you're a paper pusher in Ottawa somewhere, you're all paid under the Phoenix pay system. Now, this is how the story goes, okay? I think it was 2 or 3 separate times under Prime Minister Stephen Harper before 2015, they tried to implement this new form of software so that every 2 weeks or every month, however they get paid, bing, there's your money, it winds up in your bank account. But 3 separate times, the story goes, the senior bureaucrats warned the government, whoa, there's a lot of bugs in this thing. Okay, we can't do this yet. Okay, so they didn't do it. They kept the old system and people kept on getting paid as normal. Chapter change, the Trudeau government comes in. The story goes, they said, whoa, we've been sitting on this for 3 years. Why isn't this thing ready yet? We're going to do it. Let's push the button. I don't know if those same bureaucrats warned the Trudeau government in the same way. I don't have that smoking gun. The rumor is that they did, okay? But they pushed the button anyway. So in some cases, Andrew, these bureaucrats, these federal employees would go months and months, and in some cases a year, without getting paid. So some of them had to leave their homes. They had to move back in with their parents. Some of them were also drastically overpaid. So they have this crazy amount of money coming into their bank account, and they're having to account for it and save every nickel of it, and they don't know how much they're allowed to spend. Like, it totally messed up their budgeting. Fast forward to now, that was a great piece by Jen Hodgson, by the way, in the Western Standard. Almost $4 billion has been wasted trying to fix this software program. Again, with a B, $4 billion so far on trying to fix and implement the Phoenix pay system. To give you an idea, we could pay around 2,000 carpenters and 2,000 police officers full salary for 10 years. What we've spent on this.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
4
brutal.
CBCs.
Don't give them ideas.
I don't recommend spending it on that, but 3 CBCs, I guess.
3 and a bit, plus bonus.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Kris Sims, Alberta Director from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Always a pleasure. We will talk to you next Monday.
You betcha.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kris. Yeah, and speaking of boondoggles, like anytime the government gives you a price tag, you have to assume it's just a complete lie. It's a complete fabrication. Now, to be fair, sometimes they may believe it. Sometimes they may believe it. Like when the Liberal government said the long gun registry was going to cost $3.50 or whatever, and then it costs $1 billion. I don't think they believed that. When the government says that center block, let me look up the center block renovation. I forget this one. The center block renovation is supposed to cost, I'm missing can't find the price immediately. Center block renovation price. They say it's going to cost between 4.5 and 5 billion. This is actually pretty recent numbers, and they say they've spent $896 million. It's going to be $10 billion, and it's going to take 3 times as long. Now, I want to believe that some people that give these forecasts are genuinely, they believe it, and they want to believe it. But most of the time, I think they're just making it up. It's like, well, we've got to put a price tag to get a budget down. So we'll just say something. And then by the time everyone realizes it's costing so much more, we'll be so into it and it'll be so path dependent, we'll have to do it anyway. By the way, the gun buyback, the quote unquote gun buyback that the Liberals had promised that was supposed to cost between 400 and 600 million, now projected to be over 2 billion. And they have spent, I forget exactly how much, but they've spent millions of this without even getting a single firearm yet. So the Liberal government on its gun buyback has managed to spend millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and not actually got any guns. Now, I don't mind this. I've said this, like I don't support government waste, but I'm happy that the gun buyback does not exist, because the gun buyback is not a buyback. It's a confiscation scheme that the government is trying to pretend is just this like administrative priority. Now, because the government has been so bad at doing this, because they've been so incompetent, they're now getting pressure put on them from the gun control groups and advocates that were pushing this in the first place, who think that the Liberals are basically, as the word from Poilievre, abandoning efforts on this. Now, I think gun owners would probably love it if that were the case. It's not. Tracey Wilson joins us on the line. Tracey, it's always good to talk to you. She is with the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Andrew. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So there are a few different moving parts on this. I mean, one is that, I mean, I know are obviously tied into the firearms issue, but you're a taxpayer as well. And I'm sure on one hand, you don't like government wasting money, but as a gun owner, you're probably thrilled that they haven't managed to make this gun grab happen on their part. But why is it that they're now getting pressure from the gun control advocates? Why are they unhappy when, from my perspective, the Liberals have basically given them everything they want?
Well, they actually won't be happy until the, doors of gun owners like me across the country are kicked in by law enforcement and our stuff is forcibly confiscated. I've said right from the beginning, it doesn't matter how far the Liberals or any other government goes to appease them, they'll never be satisfied. So we saw with C-21 and the amendments G4 and G46 that they had to withdraw. They went right after hunting rifles, and they're going to do it again. So, the anti-gun lobby also professes that there are all kinds of assault-style firearms that have evaded this ban, and escaped it. While at the same time, I think most Canadians know that real assault rifles were banned back in the 70s, and this is just a further assault on legal gun owners.
You have this attitude among some gun advocates that they will not give an inch. They will not give an inch. And I think that there's some merit to that, because people like us, and certainly people like you, have seen what happens when the inch is given. And the one trend, certainly with this Liberal government, that's become clear is that wherever they say the line is drawn between an acceptable and an unacceptable gun will change the second they ban that. The second they implement that line, it moves. And I think the so-called assault rifle conundrum is an example of that, where they say the line is here and then, okay, and then handguns now. And then at a certain point, I think you're right, that I don't believe the gun control advocates would be happy until Grandpa's musket, the last musket from, 1787, is being pried out of some old farmer's hands in Saskatchewan, will they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at it, it's not even just the last 9 years of Liberal regime, but for over 30 years now, Poilievre has been calling the shots. They've gotten everything they've wanted. The increase in gun control just in the last 30 years is substantial. We've got some of the strictest regimes in the world, and yet that's still not enough. They won't be satisfied until our doors are kicked in and until they can basically abolish civilian gun ownership. And I know they profess on social media that that isn't true, but they haven't been very definitive about where their line is. Every time they get what they want, they move that goalpost a little bit more to include even more firearms. So, and at the end of the day, whether I'm a gun owner or a taxpayer, I'm also a mom and a grandma, and I see the increase in violence. And I think, what could those resources do for our communities if they were better invested in real public safety measures?
We're getting a little bit off topic here, but there was a big seizure in Peel region, which is in the Greater Toronto area last week, and police seized 71 guns, and all of the Liberals were jumping up and down saying, "Oh, great, this is Justin Trudeau, and his gun control in action." 69 of the 71 guns were smuggled in from the United States, so zero connection whatsoever to any restrictions that any government would put in on lawful gun ownership and licensing, and the remaining two may have been smuggled in as well. The origins just couldn't be traced. So it's possible that every single one of them, but certainly the majority were. But at the end of the day, gun owners are a minority in Canada. There are, maybe 2 million of us in a country of 36 million or so. How do you communicate this to a lot of people who just in their quiet, peaceful suburban existence don't think of guns and are really susceptible to the first bit of propaganda that comes across their news?
Well, I mean, I would like to think that we live in a country where we don't attack somebody just because they're a minority, just because that's not how most Canadians live. I mean, I don't know. And that's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down. But at the same time, I think this does touch every Canadian, whether you own a firearm or not, because number one, there's the property rights issue. So if the government, if I followed every rule and regulation, regardless of how ridiculous they are, complied with everything, and at the end of the day it doesn't matter, they're going to come and take my stuff, then that should sound big red flags for all Canadians. And secondly, when nobody thinks about violence happening to them, and of course the majority of us will never experience it at that kind of lethal level, but I'm sure that everybody who's been a victim of violence thought that too. So as we see crime rates rise in communities all across the country, I think everyday Canadians are going to start saying, like, hey, what is going on here? The focus has been on the wrong people for at least for the last 9 years, if not the last 30. And I think it's time to sort of recenter that balance and get back to being serious about making safer communities.
To go back to the assault rifle ban, the so-called assault rifle ban, one of the claims that the group has made in its criticism here is that tens of thousands of quote-unquote assault-style guns prohibited in 2020 remain in the hands of their owners. Now, this is referring to, of course, the fact that, my AR-15 has not been able to leave my gun safe since they were banned. I still mine, but I'm not allowed to legally do anything with it, so it's remained there collecting dust. But the whole point here is that if you are minded to follow the law, like I am and like you are, that gun is providing no safety hazard to anyone, whether I'm legally allowed to take it to the range or not. And as we've talked about in the case of Peel region, the police that are seizing these guns have said time and time again, these guns are unregistered, they're unlicensed owners. But this word assault rifle does so much heavy lifting for the Liberals here. And I know I've talked about this, but for people listening that are not as in this, what does that word mean, or what does it not mean?
Well, it's globally understood that the term assault rifle refers to a fire that has a firearm that has select fire capability. In other words, it's able to go full auto. In Canada, those have been banned since 1978. So those are unavailable to civilians, and nobody's asking for anything different. What they're targeting with this May 2020 OIC and what Poilievre keeps referring to as assault style firearms, by definition, is something is styled after something else. It is not that thing which it is styled after. So what they're talking about is more modern sporting arms. So I know as a female, an older female of small stature, I know for me, it's really important to have a firearm that is compatible to my size and shape. And a lot of these modern firearms have all kinds of adjustable stocks and a pistol grip and things like this. So anything that looks scary is now, on that ban list, and of course in the target of Poilievre, so to speak. But at the same time, this is technology advancing. I mean, my truck sitting in my laneway right now doesn't look anything like my grandfather's truck that we used to drive on the farm with, right? So it stands to reason that a lot of my guns don't look like my grandfather's either.
Yeah, and the reality is, and again, I don't want to give them any ideas here, but if you were to want to have an intellectually consistent and honest position, it would be that all guns are capable of killing, and all guns, therefore, should be banned. This idea of drawing an arbitrary line that is ultimately based on appearance is just so insanely ridiculous. And again, I don't want to push that argument too far, because I know there's going to be some Liberal member of Parliament that will say, yes, you're right, let's ban all of them. And I think certainly if they thought they could, they would. But the reality is, when they draw these lines, they do not make any sense.
No, they don't. And that's how you know it's just political theater. I mean, when you start, you've got this big basket of firearms, and of course there's all kinds. It's a very unique item, right? There's all kinds of them, all shapes and sizes and colors and functionalities. But when you're looking at the aesthetics of a firearm, the problem is that it'll never be enough for them, no matter what they stick in that band basket. It'll never be enough for them, and they want to keep adding more into there. And they actually complain about new firearms on the market as well, and this is a big problem, because as the rules and the laws change with this ever-changing Liberal gun control, what manufacturers do is they get inventive and creative, and they start creating new firearms to comply with those new rules. And Poilievre says, well, what they're doing is circumventing the law and making new assault style firearms. No, they're complying with the law. Like, it's absolutely breathtaking to see the desperation they've got. But I mean, here we are. I'm not going to ramble on too long about this, but we are 4 years down the road from when they first banned them. Every single firearm is still exactly where it was before, safely locked away in the gun rooms and safes of legal licensed gun owners. And yet crime is still raging out of control. So, Canadians need to ask themselves, maybe we took a wrong turn here and focused on the wrong demographic.
Tracey Wilson, VP of Public Relations for the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. Always good to talk to you, Tracey. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Andrew. Have a great day. You
too. And I will say that the CCFR, the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, was a very generous sponsor of a documentary that we produced here at True North about 3 years ago called Assaulted: Justin Trudeau's War on Gun Owners, talking mainly about the order in council that Tracey was alluding to there, the so-called assault-style weapon ban. And of course, a lot of the themes we talked about there still very much unresolved a few years later. So do take a look at that. It's about 40 minutes from start to finish. That is at, let me just make sure the website is still up, because we had like a dedicated domain name for it. It's still up. You can get that at assaulted.ca, and it's for 4 episodes, 4 parts, but I would encourage you to take a look. In the meantime, that does it for us for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Canada's most irreverent talk show. Thank you, God bless, and good day to you all.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.